All right, what's going on YouTube? This is BoxingWave. Make sure you subscribe to the channel. All right, so I didn't get a chance to do a video or post-fight review of the Benavidez Darrell fight last week because I did so many videos talking about the welterweights, talking about Porter and Errol Spence post-fight, and then all the other talking about a rematch, talking about Danny Garcia, Manny Pacquiao, Terrence Crawford. I did all these videos because I respond to the comments, and I want to respond to what people are saying. So I did a lot of videos on that, and then we went into this Golovkin Derevchenko weekend, and that was that. All right, so I do want to talk about 168. I'm going to talk a little bit about the fight last week, and then now I'm going to talk a little bit about 168, or the four champions at 168. Um, Benavidez fighting Dirrell was a pretty cool fight. I actually thought it was going to be a fight of the night, but Porter and Spence obviously was the best fight of the night. Uh, but yeah, I didn't do a breakdown. Didn't have time, but I did say in that breakdown that I think Benavidez would win. I didn't know if he was going to stop him by the decision, but I mean, listen, Darrell was cool. He's been a pro a long time. He's been fighting at the division a long time, but I just, between those few, you fight guys like Sakio Bika. You picked up a couple decent wins. Lost to Bottle Jack after you won the title. But besides that, man, like Darrell, Anthony didn't really fight any of the top guys. And for him to be at 168 for a very, very long time, he had a pretty padded resume. He didn't fight really the top guys at 168 over the years, and not much of any of them. So Benavidez, a guy that hasn't been there fighting pro that long. I just thought overall he was the most talented guy. He's the bigger guy. And I thought he'd just be too much. I thought he figured, he outworked Darrell. It was a fun fight. It was a lot of back and forth. Darrell did show a lot of heart. Uh, but Benavidez was just too much. But it was a good fight for what it was, for the amount of time that it lasted. It was a pretty good fight. But I just figured Benavidez he's just too big, too strong. Throws, heavy combinations, just too much. He just walked Darrell down, and Darrell didn't really have the firepower to keep him off him. But it was a fun fight. No surprise there though. So now this division is like one of my least favorite divisions because if you look at the champions, right? I mean, whatever your thoughts and opinions on each fighter, you're really judging it on the base the eye test. Because the thing is, Callum Smith and Benavidez and even Plant, like none of these guys have been around that long. They haven't been around that long, and I feel like each of them has something to prove. I think the top guys that were at 168 at one point. No, I mean, at least Callum did join the World Boxing Super Series, so I think he took the biggest risk at 168 so far because he did join the tournament. But I don't believe that this tournament was as stacked as some of the other World Boxing Super Series, like the Cruiserweight one. I don't think it was as stacked as some of the ones like 140. And I just didn't think it was as competitive. It was solid, but Kyle Smith looks great, undefeated. Very, really, really big guy at 168. A lot of power. I mean, he can easily fight at 175. And as far as size, he still would be one of the bigger guys at 175, even if he were to fight 170. I mean, the way this guy towers over the rest of the guys at 168 is crazy. But he still has a lot to prove. I mean, I know he won the tournament. He stopped George Groves, which was a good stoppage. George Groves is probably one of the better names out of all of the guys these guys fought. If you look at Plant, if you look at Saunders, who just pretty much got there, right? Pretty much started fighting there, last year, it didn't work out with Demetrius Andre. He was suspended for a little while. He fought Sufi, uh, a guy that he really didn't belong in the ring with him. And You know, he still has a lot to prove. And then, it's just, none of these guys really have much. None of them do. So I'm just waiting around to see. All right, we need unifications because even without the unification, the top ranking guys are really not that talented. There's not a lot of talent at 168. There's a lot of talent down at 160. You got talent at 175 for sure. But at 168, there's really not that much talent. You really don't have it anymore. A lot of those guys retired. 168, you had Ward there back. I mean, we're talking Ward, the Froch guys, all those guys from the Super Six got older and, they're pretty much on their way out, or the few that's still around went up to 175. You got John Pascal that used to fight at 168. So, you really don't have that many guys there. And even George Groves, who did his thing at 168, he's done, and Callum Smith beat him. So you really don't have a lot of guys there. And, even Caleb Plant, look, he recently beat Jose Uzcategui. And it's a good win. It's a solid win, but it's not like no crazy win. And the thing is, Caleb Plant, even though he did well, he dropped him a couple of times. He was outboxing him early. Those last 3-4 rounds, it seemed like everything was going in Uzcategui's, in his favor in the closing rounds. So you got Benavidez, who's good. He's legit. Uh, I think he'll beat everybody else that's not a champion. I think he'll beat everybody else. Also, Jesse Hart just recently went up. You got uh, Gilberto Ramirez, who recently went up to 175. It's not a lot of competition there right now, unfortunately. And I feel like if it's not unification, I really don't care for it because that's all that's really left to do, man. It's not really that many. It's not much talent there. So the way I see it, I think the best like action-packed fight would probably be Callum Smith against Jose Benavidez. You got two big guys, two guys that could punch. Okay, I think that would be the most exciting fight. I think the more technically sound guys are definitely Callum Plant and believe Joe Saunders. All right, um, it will probably be much easier to make. We're probably likely to see Billy Joe Saunders against Callum Smith and Callum Plant against Benavidez because you know these guys are fighting on one side. Billy Joe Saunders now with the zone. He's now with Matchroom. So you can make the fight easy with Callum Smith. And then you got the two other guys that's fighting over here in the PBC. Okay, Benavidez and Callum Plant. All right, so let's get these unifications going. These guys are already talking about each other. I don't care which way they do it. I don't care how they slice it up. We know that I don't know about Callum Smith. I probably should check the. But I know Billy Joe Saunders got a fight coming up. Not not against anyone that he can't beat. He's gonna run through the guy he's fighting. Callum Smith is fighting his mandatory that I'm expecting him to have a big win and probably a stoppage over. And hopefully we get the big domestic Billy Joe Saunders against Callum Smith fight next year. Okay. And as far as Callum Plant and Benavidez, hopefully we get that fight. Now, who do I think is going to win these fights? I mean, I'll do a breakdown when the fights are announced and stuff like that. You guys know how to do it, but if I had to pick between Benavidez and Callum Plant, quick thoughts. I would definitely think that Caleb Plant would be outboxing him in the early rounds. I do think Caleb Plant is better than Anthony Dirrell. So I do see him giving Benavidez some trouble early on. All right. And definitely with his slickness, his boxing ability, his jab, his lateral movement, his good superior defense, counter punching, all that. But I think Benavidez will eventually start walking him down a lot earlier than Uzcategui. Uzcategui just didn't, even though he's a puncher, just didn't let his hands go enough. Uh, just looked bad defensively. He's just not as talented as Benavidez. Excuse me. He's not as big. I don't think he has a defense that Benavidez has. I think Benavidez, when it comes to pressure, I think he would just be better than Uzcategui was against Plant. And I think at some point, I think Benavidez might be a little too much. I think Plant will probably win the first half of the fight. But after he slows down a bit, I can see Benavidez taking over. All right. I think he's just too big, too powerful. Um, and I just think he would take over in the second half of that fight. All right. But that would be an excellent fight. And then between Billy Joe and Callum Smith, which is even harder to call in my opinion. I think both fights can go either way. Because I could definitely see Plant winning on points. But this fight is even harder to call because I think Billy Joe Saunders is even a little bit more superior than Callum Plant as far as technical ability. I mean, I think his reflexes, his quickness is too raw, too good. It's just that even though I think Billy Joe Saunders is superior than even George Groves, I can see him outboxing Callum Smith. His movement, his hand speed, his counter punching could be a lot for Callum Smith, who I think it could be a little stiff. Callum Smith could change the fight with one punch. I mean, he's that type of puncher, and he's explosive. He kind of ambushes you. And if you're not careful, he could finish you off. And I think Billy Joe Saunders, he gets a little cocky, and if he catches the wrong kind of shot from Callum Smith, can definitely change the fight around. Doesn't matter if Billy Joe's winning; he's outboxing him on points. It doesn't really matter. A quick left jab or a right hand can easily hurt Billy Joe, and Billy Joe can easily go down, and you just never know. You never know. All right, so we even see him get hurt against it's Foodie, it's Sufi. I'm sorry, I'm saying his name wrong. Even in that fight, Billy Joe was like dominating that fight, and then he just caught a big shot and got rocked, and he had the noodle legs for a little bit. Billy Joe Saunders, I like him. I like him. I like watching him fight. I don't really like him personally, but I like watching him fight because he's very talented. I always thought that he would give Canelo one of the toughest fights, but he really messed it up for me when he did fight. He did fight Andre, and he tested positive for that test. He had a bad year last year. He got all that stuff caught up with that. The whole mess in his car, that whole mess that came out, that scandal that came out, and then the whole thing. With him failing the drug test kind of pissed me off because I wanted to see him test themselves at 160, and I wanted Andre to test himself, and both of these guys to test themselves by fighting each other, but we never got it. So he moved up. He had a couple fights now, and the thing is, it's like these guys are not really that good. He's had some decent fights, but in between, Eubank Jr., who wasn't proven at that time, who was very unproven at the time that Saunders fought him. He did fight Andy Lee, but that was even another fight that I felt like Andy Lee came back, and late in that fight, and he had a couple questionable wins in there. Billy Joe Saunders still has a lot to prove, and Callum Smith, who is a good fighter, strong fighter, big puncher, seems to be a little stiff. He can definitely be outboxed if he doesn't knock out and stop his opponent. And I do think Saunders is a little bit better, more talented than George Groves, even though George Groves is a more seasoned 168 fighter up there. So a lot of it's really tough. It's really tough to call these fights. They're all good fights that could be made. It's just that none of them are really officially proven. Unlike the guys that used to fight at the division, some of the guys that moved up, some of the James DeGale, the Carl Froches, the Andre Wards, the George Groves of the world, the Andre Dirrells of the world, um, you know, uh, Jack moved up, Gilberto Ramirez moved up, Jesse Hart moved up, like everybody moved up or either retired or whatever. It's a newer, younger division, and a lot of these guys still need to prove themselves. They've been around, but a lot of these guys haven't really proven themselves yet in that division. So I need to see more. Hopefully, we get the unifications. It really shouldn't be that hard to make these matches. Once Benavidez and Plant unifies, once Callum Smith and Billy Joe unifies, we should really have a undisputed by the end of next year. As long as the mandatories are out of the way, we should really get a undisputed you know, if everything works well. And I don't feel like any of those fighters are too big of a superstar to not get an undisputed title fight. You know, all these guys talk a lot about each other. We should be able to get the fight without too many problems because unlike the welterweight division, no one is too big there. You know, Spence, Danny Garcia, Keith Thurman, Crawford, all these guys have bigger names. Some of them fought on pay-per-views, Manny Pacquiao. It's harder to make the fights there, but you know, because of the Eagles. But at 168, just like at 140 or 175, it should be easier to make these fights because none of these guys are like mega stars. You know what I'm saying? So usually when, you know, even when you go down and look at 118, you know, the lower weight division, you're gonna have Donaire fighting uh Inoue and stuff. And look at the other divisions that are the smaller divisions. It shouldn't be as hard. All right. So anyway, let me know what you guys think. I love the division. I just need the unification. You know, if we get into a couple of unifications, those fights are all potentially good fights, good wars or whatever. They should all be good fights. These last two or three fights, we should be able to get it, but until then, I don't see any of the lower end guys beating any of these top four guys, these four champions. I don't see it. You know, you still have Chris Eubank Jr. there, but even him, I don't see him beating any of those top guys. You know, and Saunders already beat him. George Groves beat him. Eubank is good. I think he's approved in some areas, but I still don't see him as a top guy. I think Callum Smith will beat him. I think Benavidez will beat him. I think Caleb Plant will outbox him. And I think Billy Joe Saunders will outbox him again. All right, so wait to see what happens. But anyway, I'm going to leave it at that. Let me know what you guys think. And make sure you guys subscribe again. Peace.